for the next couple of hours or so to learn all about the power of influence from the amazing one and only David Shephard.
Morning, everyone. How are we doing today? Good. August 1995. Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm experiencing a rather unusual emotion and state inside of myself. Because I'm excited and I'm terrified, both at the same time. How many people here have ever experienced that, being excited and nervous or terrified at the same time? My mentor and trainer in NLP, Tad James, had just asked me to train on his trainer's training. And he wanted me to do a session, for those of you who already know about NLP, on chaining anchors the following morning. I'd had no preparation, no nothing. I didn't even know he was going to ask me to do it. So I was excited because I knew it was such a huge opportunity for me. But equally, I was scared as well because I'd had no preparation and I didn't want to let him down. And I got less than 24 hours to put together this training. So I went back to my room that night. I was going to be on stage the following morning at 10 o'clock. And I sat there staring at a blank piece of paper for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours, for 4 hours. I guess I'd got what might be called speaker's block. How many people here have ever experienced that? You've got a presentation put together and you just haven't got a clue. Just nothing is coming at all. So finally I decided that I needed to go to bed. And so I had a chat with my unconscious mind and asked my unconscious mind to work on my presentation whilst I was asleep. Because I have a great trust for my unconscious mind. And I thought maybe I'll dream it or revelation will come to me in the night. And I woke up the next morning after having a night of totally dreamless sleep. And I had nothing. And the clock's ticking. So I thought maybe it'll come to me whilst I'm having a shower. So I have a shower. Nothing comes to me. Maybe it'll come to me whilst I'm having a shave, because quite often I get some of my greatest revelations whilst I'm having a shave. Well, I'd finished my left leg and still nothing had come to me. So I thought maybe it will come to me whilst I'm having breakfast. So I had breakfast and nothing had come to me. Now I'm starting to get a little bit panicked, because by this point in time it's like 9 o'clock and I'm on stage at 10 and I've still got nothing. So I thought maybe I just need to do something completely different. Maybe I need to stop thinking about it. Maybe I just need to distract myself. So I went and sat out by the pool and I thought I'll sit by the pool and read a book. And I'd taken only one novel with me, which is actually the only novel that Deepak Chopra has ever written, which is a book called The Return of Merlin. And as I'm reading this novel of The Return to Merlin, my entire presentation dropped out of the ether into my mind. Fortunately, by 9:30. So there I am on the trainer's training stage in Vancouver. There's about 100 people in the audience. And I made this assumption that these people would be expecting me to demonstrate absolutely everything they'd be learning over the next 18 days. So I was introduced just like I was just now, and I make my way onto the stage, a round of applause. And I don't know about you, and Andy, I think, has told you lots of things about the importance of telling stories or metaphors as a trainer. Yeah. And I would agree they're massively important. Now, when I did my trainer's training, though, at the end of the first day, the trainer, the master trainer more correctly, said, overnight, what you need to do is put together 5 metaphors that you can deliver tomorrow morning in front of your audience. 5 metaphors. Now, I don't know your experience of when Andy said to you first that you've got to create metaphors or stories, but the experience that I had when the master trainer said 5 metaphors by tomorrow morning was I could feel myself disappearing into the chair. Because I had a limiting belief that I was a crap storyteller. Now, in actual fact, it wasn't a limiting belief. So there's nothing I could do about it. It was true. And I had a hell of a lot of evidence to suggest that this was true. And, you're sitting there thinking about telling stories, and, a memory came into my mind. It was a memory from 1990 of being on a training where I was learning to become a coach. And the trainer on this particular training, a guy by the name of Roy, had just discovered metaphors. And he thought that metaphors were the best thing since sliced bread, which if you think about it is a metaphor in and of itself, So for 5 days, all we did was metaphors. Imagine 5 days of metaphors with the belief that you're a crap storyteller. To say it was an uncomfortable experience was awful. But finally it came to the last day, the morning of the last day. And there was 13 people on this training. And it wasn't laid out like this, it was laid out in the typical kind of like business layout of a U shape. And I'm sat just here. And my best mate, Andy Cooper, is sat just here. And we're waiting for Roy to arrive. And Roy finally comes into the room. No warning, no nothing. First thing he said was, okay, what's a metaphor that you can use that would enable somebody to dramatically increase their results? Andy, you first. No warning, no nothing. This wasn't given as homework. Andy, you first. I'm thinking, poor Andy. Oh, boy, am I glad I'm number 13. Have you ever had that kind of experience where you're really glad you haven't gone first? Yeah. Anyway, Andy comes up with this metaphor straight off the cuff, straight off the bat, and it's brilliant. Have you ever had one of those experiences where you really wished you'd gone first? And so Andy did his metaphor, and I can't remember the next guy's name. He goes, you, what's your metaphor? And this guy came out with an even better one than Andy's. Then he goes to the third guy, what's your metaphor? And he comes out with an even better one than the other guy. And I'm thinking, if this trend continues around the table, I'm going to be a huge disappointment to the crowd at large, So I'm thinking, what's my metaphor? What's my metaphor? What's my metaphor? What's my metaphor? I don't know if you've ever sat in a room and listened to people telling stories, but, your mind after a while begins to wander. And I was kind of like transported way back into time when I was a kid. Maybe I was about 5, 6, or 7 years old. And one of the things I was really curious about as a kid was radios. Speaking to you as a child. How do you get the people inside? Now, as a kid, you don't just wonder about that. I had to find out. So I'd take a radio, went in my dad's toolbox, took the screws out the back of the radio to take a look inside. And much to my surprise, there were no people in there. Now, if you think about it as a kid, if there were people in there, that's what you're expecting. And you go, hello. But there's no people in there. So that makes you even more curious. How does a radio work with no people inside? So I took the screwdriver and made some changes inside. Fortunately, it was a battery radio, which is why I'm still here. And as a kid, you learn really quickly. I learned in no time at all how to make a radio not work. So then I go to get another radio, take the back off, and make changes inside. Now, my mum and dad are getting nervous at this point in time because we're running out of radios. And my dad can see me walking across the lounge with a screwdriver in my hand towards the TV set. Now, I actually wound up doing electronics at university, so I can say with some kind of like authority that the only difference between a TV set and a radio is that with a TV set, they put a window in the front, so you can see the people inside, So they went out to to the neighbors and said, has there anybody got broken radios? David's into taking radios apart. Has anybody got broken radios? And they donated broken radios to us. And so I'd take the screws out the back and make changes inside. And every now and again, I'd make a change inside. And the radio would start to work. And so I'd take the radio back to the neighbors and say, look, here's your radio back. And they say, David, we don't want it. It doesn't work. I go, it does now. I'd switch it on. And much to their amazement. And they give me 50p, which doubled my salary, put me into the next tax bracket as a 7-year-old. And they say to my mum and dad, they say, how can David fix radios at like 5, 6, 7 years old? And I still remember what their answer was to this day, but I'm still fascinated by radios. I mean, if you have one at home, do this little experiment. When you turn the volume control down, all the way down from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, all the way down to 1, you'll notice it all goes quiet inside. That's right. Now, one day, I'd got one of these radios that I'd made work, and I was tuning in to various stations, and there's a particular station that caught my ear because it was broadcasting a radio play. And it was broadcasting a radio play about Merlin and Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Now, as a kid, I was fascinated by wizards and magicians. So I decided to listen carefully to the radio play. Now, I don't know if you've ever listened to a radio play before, but it's not the same as watching TV or going to the movies because there are no pictures. So when you listen to a radio play, you literally have to go inside and make up your own pictures because they don't provide any. You have to go inside and make up your own pictures. So I'm listening to this radio play, and I'm transported even further back in time to the time of Merlin, Arthur, and the Knights of the Round Table. Now, I don't know if you know the story, but I'll definitely tell the story for those people who aren't from the UK who are watching today. The story is this. Arthur was the true king of England, but nobody knew. And he'd been working with Merlin, the great magician, the great wizard, who'd been teaching him magic. Now, what Merlin had done is he'd taken this sword, which was given to him by the Lady of the Lake, and it was called Excalibur. And he'd stuck Excalibur into a stone and cast a spell on it, so that only the true king of England would be able to remove the sword from the stone. Now, many people had tried to remove Excalibur from the stone, but because they weren't the true rightful king of England, they'd failed. So Arthur had been training with Merlin for a long time. And one day Merlin came to him and said, Arthur, it's time for you to work your magic. It's time for you to use what you know to remove Excalibur from the stone, claim your power, and rule your kingdom. So they traveled for days and days and days to where Excalibur was in the stone. And when they got there, you can imagine the scene was set. Huge stone here, with Excalibur rising out of the stone and glinting in the sunlight. And Merlin said to Arthur, take the sword from the stone. And as soon as Arthur thought about that, he went into a rather unusual state. So he looked at Excalibur, and he hesitated. Have you ever hesitated? I mean, not now, but have you ever hesitated in the past? So you know what he felt like? It was almost like he was anchored to the spot, you know. And Merlin watched Arthur in this rather resourceful state and thought, poor Arthur, what can I do to help him? Now, Merlin knew the power of words. Because at one point in time, it was believed that words were magic because of the impact that they can have on people. So Merlin, looking at Arthur over there, said, "So Arthur, how would you like to feel instead?" And no sooner had the words left Merlin's mouth, they had a deep, profound impact on Arthur's state. You could see it in his physiology. Because he said, "I want to stand there with Excalibur in my hands, feeling the power of Excalibur coursing down my arms, filling up my body now." He said, "Then just that one thing will mean I can do anything. Just that one thing means I can do absolutely everything." Have you ever felt like that? Even if only for a moment? A moment where you went, "I can do anything. I can do absolutely everything." So Merlin sat there on his medieval bar stool. He thought, so what do I need to do to get Arthur from here to here? And at this point in time, a huge bird flew overhead, because they had bigger birds in those days. A huge bird flew overhead, and it was around about 25 to 11, according to Merlin's sundial, flying overhead, and it had eaten its breakfast several hours earlier, and it decided it was feeling a little bit heavy and would let some stuff go, if you like. And as he flew over Merlin's head, he did just that. And it fell squarely on Merlin's head. "Shit," he said. But knowing about cause and effect and perception to projection, the rules of the universe, Merlin knew that somehow he must have created that. It's also a useful learning to get that even great magicians and wizards get dumped on every now and again. But Merlin always liked to get a learning of the day. He'd say, so how did I create this? And what is there for me to learn about this? Such that if I learn it, then I'll be able to create more of what I want in the future. And as soon as he'd asked himself that question, ideas came flooding up from his unconscious mind. And he always liked to get a learning of the day, just one learning of the day. And this is a really important learning. You might want to actually write this down. Never, 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 never look up with your mouth open. Hey, listen, useful learning. Particularly in London with pigeons, So after he got his learning, he came back outside again, and there was Arthur, once again hesitating. And Merlin decided, right, it's time to work some magic. So he said to Arthur, last time you hesitated, what was it that got you out of the hesitation? He said, because everybody's hesitated in the past. But you must have done something to get out of that, otherwise you'd never have come to see me in the first place. What was it that got you out of the hesitation? And again, the words worked their magic. And you could see the state change in Arthur. And he said, well, you see, I just got so frustrated. More frustrated than I've ever been in my life before. Have you ever been frustrated? Not now. I mean, have you ever been frustrated, really frustrated? He said, and the frustration just built up inside of me. I just went off. Fuck it. So fucking frustrated. And Merlin looked at him and said, I better get Arthur out of this quick because he's going to explode, So what was it that got you out of the frustration, Arthur? Because you can't stay like that forever. You'd wear yourself out. And again, the words began to work their magic. You could see the physiology change. And Arthur said, well, you see, I had a aha moment. A light bulb moment. A light came on inside. Something clicked inside. And I said to myself, now I've got it. Have you ever had one of those moments? I guess if you were Archimedes, you'd call it a eureka moment, and then clear up the water afterwards. One of those, now I've got it, a light bulb moment. Something clicks inside. Now, Merlin knew a lot of people who knew exactly what to do, but never got round to doing anything with it. You might know somebody like that, who knows exactly what to do, but never actually takes action. And Merlin didn't want that for Arthur. So he said to Arthur, so what's in between totally going for it over here and knowing exactly what to do? And again, the words began to work their magic. And you could see it in Arthur's body. He said, you see, I get right on the verge, right on the edge. He said, it's a bit like when you know you're going to sneeze, but you haven't sneezed yet. You know that feeling? You know that kind of... that feeling? Interesting, you use exactly the same muscles and nerves before you sneeze as you do just before you... That's the one, yeah. It'll come to me in a minute. You know, when you get like right on the verge, right on the edge, and you get closer, and get closer and closer and closer and closer. Have you ever been right on the verge? Right on the edge? I know you have, even if you were by yourself at the time. Right on the verge, right on the edge, and it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up. And it's getting more and more and more intense. And you're thinking, I'm not sure how much more of this I can take, but I'm willing to experiment. As you get closer and closer and closer to the edge. So Merlin thought, right, now's the time to work some magic. Now, if the myths and the legends and the rumors are true, there is power and magic in wizards and magicians' gestures. But if you think about it, that would make sense, from an NLP point of view, since 55% of the meaning of communication is in the physiology, as far as that's concerned. So it would make sense, really, that we would have power in our gestures. I know every single one of you knows there's power in gestures. Don't you? As far as that's concerned. Absolutely, you know there's power in gestures, but I don't care if you remember them or not. So Merlin fired a magical gesture in the direction of Arthur over here, as once again he was hesitating to take the sword from the stone. And the gesture went something like this. And no sooner had he fired off that magical gesture, a strange chain of events began to take place in Arthur's physiology. Because I'm so fucking frustrated with myself. Now I've got it. Then he became almost like a coiled spring. And you could see it building up inside of him as he got closer and closer. And if you were watching him, you go, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? And then suddenly, with one swish, whoosh, the sword was out of the stone. And Arthur was holding Excalibur in his hands. You could see the power of Excalibur coursing down his arms, filling up his body. And you'd say to yourself, now there is someone who can do absolutely anything. There is someone who can do absolutely everything. Merlin thought to himself, not a bad morning's work, really. So let's talk about how we can influence people as a speaker from the stage. Now, on the trainer's training that Andy talked about, we teach 30 different things that a trainer of NLP uses all at the same time, concurrently, whilst they're speaking. 30 things. Now, and that takes 18 days. Have I got 18 days? No. How long have I got? About an hour and a half. So what I'm going to give you is a taster of some of the things that we can use to influence our audiences as a speaker. Now, why is this important? It's because in business and life in general, we don't get what we deserve. How many people here have ever had an experience where you truly, truly, truly believed you deserved something and you didn't get it? Yeah. Because in life, we don't get what we deserve. What we get is what we influence. Now, let's differentiate between influence and persuasion, from my perspective. Persuasion is when you persuade someone to change their mind. And as Andy was saying, as a speaker, what business are we in? We're in the business of change, changing minds. So is that about persuasion? Yeah, it is. Influence, though, is not only changing someone's mind, but having them follow through with a change in their action and their behavior. Because I'm sure you all know people who've changed their minds and then do nothing about it. Influence goes a step further, where we have people not only change their minds, but follow through with a change in their behavior and a change in their actions. That's what we want as a speaker. We want to go beyond persuasion as a speaker and move to influence as a speaker. Oops. There we go. So what kind of tools and techniques can we use to influence as a speaker? So there's eliciting states. In my little Merlin and Arthur story, did I elicit some states? Yeah. Now, why is it important to elicit states as a speaker? I think that we've probably all seen speakers that only elicit one state. That one. So obviously what you want to do is you want to differentiate yourself from other speakers. You want to be the speaker that sticks in their mind. Now, how do we manage to make ourselves stick out and stick in somebody's mind for the longest possible time? By eliciting states. How many people here have got a favorite song or a favorite piece of music? Great, everybody. Now, even though I'm not Darren Brown, and even though I don't know what that song or piece of music is, I can have a pretty good guess as to why it's your favorite one. Because it changed the way that you felt in some way. Is that true? How many people here have a favorite movie? Now, even though I don't know what that movie is, my guess is it's your favorite movie because it changed the way that you felt in some way. So what we want to do as a speaker, an influential speaker, is to change the way that people feel moment by moment. Take them on an emotional roller coaster in your presentations. Then what we want to do is actually anchor those states to you and where we are on the stage. It's what's called stage anchoring. We want to do pacing and leading with language and also do something which is called pre-framing. These are the things I'm going to talk to you about today. How do we go about eliciting states from audiences? How do we go about anchoring those on the stage? How can we pace and lead people from where they are now to where you want them to be using our language? And how do we do this thing called pre-framing? All of these things you've seen Andy do. Yeah. All of these things the great speakers and presenters do. How many people here have seen Tony Robbins present either live or on video? Say aye. Great. Brilliant. No anchoring them there at all, yeah? Tony Robbins uses all of these things. In fact, the interesting thing is with what Andy teaches you here and what I teach in my trainings is, what we teach you is all the things that Tony Robbins uses but doesn't teach anyone. These are the secrets. So I'm going to let you into today are the secrets of the people like Tony Robbins and other really powerful presenters. So, but I'll ask you to be kind. Because in a way, what we're doing, it's a bit like the Wizard of Oz, you know. We're going to lift the veil. And there's the powerful wizard, but you'll see the little man in the background with the bellows. Yeah. So you'll begin to see how Andy's using all of these things. You begin to see how I'm using all of these things. So be kind, be gentle with us. We're letting you into the secret. Interestingly, though, when you know what they are, they work even better. So let's look at eliciting states. How do we go about eliciting states from audiences? Stories. Stories are the absolute best way to elicit states from audiences. Why? Well, when you were a kid, didn't you love being told a story? It grabs your attention, doesn't it? And when you're a kid, you only have an unconscious mind. You don't have a conscious mind. When we go through this overrated, in my opinion, process of growing up, then we get a conscious mind. But you still have an unconscious mind. And as a presenter and a speaker, which mind do you want to be influencing? Conscious mind or unconscious mind? Absolutely, yeah. This is the difference between getting the person's heart as well as their mind. You've probably heard people say, I want to get my people's hearts and minds. Getting their minds is just persuasion. Getting hearts and minds is influence. Because when you've got hearts and minds, then not only have they changed their mind, but they follow through with action. So stories are very, very powerful ways of eliciting states. Particularly what we call universal experiences. Experiences that everyone in the room, at some point in time in their life, has had. To give you an example, how many people here remember their first driving lesson? Yeah, how did that go for you? Not very well. Yeah, no. I remember my first driving lesson, because, 17 years old, consciously, I thought, I can drive. I've seen my mum drive, seen my dad drive, seen thousands of people drive. So it made sense that I could drive too. Why do I need driving lessons? I can drive. It's just a matter of being 17. But anyway, you book your first driving lesson. Walk out to the car. I sit there in the driving seat for the first time. And I go into complete overwhelm and overload. There's all of these dials in front of me. There's levers. I look down and there's 3 pedals on the floor, but I've only got 2 feet. And I go, how do I press the middle pedal? And as a guy, I had all kinds of feelings of inadequacy and everything. I'm like, there's no way I'll ever reach that. And do you change gear before you press the clutch or after you press the clutch and all this kind of stuff? And unlike you, my driving instructor had been trained in very advanced feedback mechanisms, like it's in there somewhere, that kind of thing. I think it was probably 20 minutes before I managed to drive away from the curb, and I did the kangaroo drive. You've done that, yeah? Yeah. So, but after about half an hour, I was thinking, I'm starting to get this. Of course, I hadn't realized that he's pressing the clutch for me on the double controls. I'm thinking, I'm starting to get this now. So as I'm driving down the road thinking I'm starting to get it, he goes like, look in the mirror. I'm going like, why do I want to see where I've been? I want to see where I'm going. No, I don't want to look in the mirror. And after 45 minutes, I think my first driving lesson, I got home, I was absolutely exhausted. My mum said to me, how was your driving lesson? I went like, will this ever become something that I totally master? Will this ever become something which is completely automatic? But what happens as you go through more driving lessons? It gets easier, doesn't it? I bet now you drive completely unconsciously. How many people here have been on a journey, familiar journey, you get to where you're going and you can't remember how you got there? Who was driving the car? Your unconscious mind was driving the car. Now, that's a universal experience, isn't it? I can pretty much take it that 80% of the people in the room have learned to drive, and they experienced their first driving lesson the same way as me. Yeah. Now, what does that cause them to do? As I'm talking about my driving lesson, you as the audience have no choice but to remember your driving lesson. And as soon as you bring up the memory of your first driving lesson, you'll automatically go into the same state that you were in during the first driving lesson. It's a very, very quick and instantaneous way of eliciting state. But universal experiences go even further than that. Because how many people here have heard of rapport from an NLP point of view? Yeah. And we create rapport through sameness. Now, I'm talking about my driving lesson, Everybody in the room's going, that's what my driving lesson was like. That sameness. We now have rapport. So not only have you elicited a state, we've created a rapport. But universal experiences work even harder for us than that. I think we've probably all seen speakers and presenters and trainers, and they present and speak and train with an air of, I know significantly more about this than you, and I always will. Now, with universal experiences, what it does is it brings you into the audience. You as the speaker, you as the presenter, are the same as that person up there. So unconsciously, what you've done is you've empowered your audience, because they're going, she's just like me. If they can do that, I can do that. So in one story, what you've done is you've elicited a state, you've built rapport, and you've empowered your audience. So an exercise that you could do, and I'm just going to give you loads of information this morning, so then I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can use it. A great exercise to do is actually to write down all the universal experiences and a prediction of what they will do, the state that they will elicit. Because equally, what universal experiences do is they elicit the state in you too. And you don't have to write them down. The reason why you don't have to write them down is because you were there. I don't need to script out my first driving lesson. All I need to do is just transport myself to my first driving lesson in my mind and tell you what it was like. There's no way you could get up on the stage and not know what to say. All you've got to do is tell it the way it was. Archetypal stories. Merlin and Arthur, for instance. Myths and legends. Why do we love these kind of stories when we're a kid? Why do we love these kind of movies when we're a kid? Because they bring up within us deep, deep, deeply rooted states inside of us. So let's talk about then, how do we go about then anchoring these states? Yep. So there's a number of different steps to this. First step is get the audience in a state. Tell them a story. Then provide a stimulus. Now, anchoring in NLP, for those of you who haven't studied NLP yet, anchoring is basically Pavlovian stimulus response patterns. We are anchoring machines. It's not a matter of whether you're anchoring your audience or not. You're anchoring your audience. There's no way that you can't. The question is, are you anchoring them in a useful way or not a useful way? Yeah. So, here's the thing about the music again. How about the hour song phenomenon? A particular song comes on the radio, and immediately you're transported back to a certain time in your life when you're with a particular person and you felt a particular way. Or there's the perfume or aftershave. As soon as you smell that smell, immediately a person pops into your mind. Why is it when you're sitting in your car at the side of the road going nowhere and you look in the rear view mirror and you see a blue flashing light, you put your foot on the brake? Because you're anchored to it. So we're anchoring all of the time. Your audiences are getting anchored to you. The question is, how do we anchor people in a useful way? So we need to provide a particular stimulus. Then we'd change the state, and then we'd test it by firing the anchor off again. That's the steps for creating an anchor. And there are a number of keys to effective anchoring. The intensity of the state. The more intense, the better. The timing of the anchor. So we want to time it so that it's right at the intensity of the state. The uniqueness of the anchor. The more unique, the better. Our ability to replicate the anchor. And also anchoring outside of the audience's awareness. Now, when I was doing anchoring earlier, I made my anchors really, really, really obvious for you, because I wanted to demonstrate what I was going to be teaching you later. But most of your audiences won't know any of this stuff. So your anchoring will be outside of their awareness. Yeah. Somebody give me a wolf whistle there. That's nice. And the number of times that we can anchor it. And so what we want to do is we want to anchor at the peak of the state. Now, what a person's neurology is doing at this point in time is they're feeling a particular way, and their nervous system is scanning absolutely everything that's going on around them, everything that they can see, everything that they can hear, and it's scanning for something unique that it can link to the state. So what that means is that when we've got an audience in a state, and we provide a unique stimulus at that point in time, their nervous system will link them together. So then if we fire off that state again, they'll go back into the same state. So let's look at some things that we can do as a speaker. Oops. Firstly, there's using the stage. So draw on your page a map of your stage. Now, this is whether you've got a physical stage or not. I mean, here we've actually got a physical stage. You might not have a physical stage, but this is still your stage. This is your area to play with. So, and you might have a bar stool here, like this. Now, there's a number of things then that you can do with this. For instance, when I was talking about August 1995, Vancouver, British Columbia, I was stood over there. And that was the past. So we can create, if you like, a visual timeline, either on our stage or I chose to do it in front of the stage. So when I'm talking about the past, I'm over here. When I'm talking about the present, I'm over here. When I'm talking about the future, I'm over here. Or even using gestures. Now, in the Western world, people tend to think of time traveling from left to right, because that's the way that we read. Now, in certain languages in the East, they are the other way around, so you might need to reverse it as far as that's concerned. The important thing to remember as a speaker is you need to reverse it from where you would naturally use it. Because for me, that's my future. But it's not for you. That's your past. So then what we can start to do is that we can talk about the past here, talk about things in the present here, and talk about things in the future here. And naturally, as we begin to move around the stage, we will elicit that state of thinking of the past, being in the present, and being in the future as we're speaking. So what we're starting to do is to take control of the state of our audience. Now, also, you can put different states just here, in the bar stool. So you'll notice that when we came here, then this is the Merlin state, isn't it? Because all of Arthur is down here. So this is Merlin. So what I was using is an order and sequence of states. So here, hesitation. Here, fucking frustrated. Here, now I've got it. Here, that wonderful state of being right on the, that's right. And then there, totally going for it. So you'll notice as well that each one of those places I went to on the stage had different gestures, different physiology, different words, what you might call a phrase that pays, a certain voice tonality, because we want to create uniqueness. So here, when I was hesitating, I had a very different physiology and voice tonality than over here, totally going for it. All of that becomes part of the anchor. Yeah. Now here, for instance, I now have, now I've got it, light bulb moment. And you've all had that light bulb moments before, haven't you? Yeah. Now imagine how you could use that. Let's say that in your presentation or your training or whatever it is, somebody isn't getting something. So they ask you a question. Where would be a really great place to answer that question from? So what would you do? Great question. Let's shed some light on that, shall we? Because as soon as you stand here and fire that off, they're going to go into the aha moment state. But they'll go into the aha moment state for whatever they're thinking about at the time, which is their question. That's how you can begin to use the different states that you've got on the stage. Now, here is another one from earlier on. As you turn the radio control down, all the way down, from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, it all goes quiet inside. Doesn't it? So that's now anchored to here, but to that particular tone of voice. And notice the state that you're in right now. And compare it to this state here. There you go. So all I need to do is stand up, do a different gesture, different physiology, different voice tonality, and your state immediately changed. That is how you take control of the state moment by moment for audiences. Yeah. So we do it with gestures. Now, we mentioned Tony Robbins. Does Tony Robbins do anchoring, do you think? How many people here think Tony Robbins does anchoring? Say aye. Right, great. Now, if you've seen him, he does different things on different parts of the stage. He has his, what he would call his power spot, right in the front of the stage. But then, I think he does this in the Unleash the Power Within. There's a certain point in time where somebody brings out a bar stool, and he sits on the bar stool. It's normally over this side of the stage here. And this is what this is where Tony Robbins shares his secrets. And he sits there on the bar stool and he lowers his tone of voice. He says, I want to tell you something about my past. Something that actually I don't share with many people. 5,000 fucking people in the room. But people are going, Tony's sharing a secret just with me. And that's then anchored to this bar, to him sitting on this bar stool. And he shares his secrets and all those kind of things. And now people are thinking they're being led into Tony's personal world and all of these kind of stuff. And then he stands up, the audience changes the state, and they take the bar stool away. Now, if Tony wants to elicit this state again, all he needs to do is bring the bar stool out, sit on it, use the same voice tonality, leans forward slightly, and immediately people go into Tony's sharing his personal secrets with me. Yep. So these kind of things work all of the time. Now let's talk about borrowing anchors. So normally, when I'm running one of my trainings, I start out from the bar stool. Yep. And I was running a training for the marketing department of Reckitt and Coleman. 30, 40 people on this particular training. And I was introduced by the marketing director, whose name was also David. Now, David came onto the stage, and he stood over here. And I was looking at the audience, 40 people who work for him, and what I noticed is that he has them eating out of his hand. They think this guy is wonderful. I mean, all credit to him. He has a team that actually would follow him to the ends of the earth. And as he's introducing me, he has this rather strange gesture as he's speaking, which is like that. Yeah. And then he introduces me. Do you think I started my presentation from over there? No, I started from over here. And I borrowed his gesture. And I kept firing that off until I saw the same response to me as I'd seen to him. Then I went over here. That is borrowing someone's anchors. Yeah. So you might be in different situations where you're one of a series of speakers or presenters. Is that true? Yeah. Like you might be at a conference, for instance, and maybe you're on in the afternoon. Here's a couple of things with that. Whenever I go for a speaking gig, I might be on in the afternoon. I go for the entire day. Here's the reason why. I want to see the earlier presenters. This is what I'm looking for. If there's a presenter that is like the audience really responds well to, I want to notice where they stand. I want to notice any idiosyncratic gestures that they've got. So that then when I go onto the stage, I can stand in the same place as them and fire off their anchors. But equally, I want to see anybody that doesn't present well. I want to see people the audience doesn't respond well to. Because they're creating anchors as well, just not good ones. The last place I want to stand is where they're standing. The last thing I want to do is fire off their gestures. Because I'll be borrowing their anchors again, but not useful ones. This is a reason why I always ask for a headset microphone. Most of the speakers will speak from the lectern. And you've seen people when they speak from the lectern. Yeah. What they do is they grab hold of the lectern and they lose the use of their legs. Yeah. And they're holding on for dear life and their knuckles are going white. Yeah. The last place you want to be is stuck behind the lectern. So now you can move out and go anywhere you want. So whenever you go and speak somewhere, always go for the entire day. Because here's another thing that you would avoid by that. I was speaking for the $1 Million Roundtable, and I was actually on just before lunch. But I was there for the entire day. And there was a speaker on before me, and he told a joke that went really well. I mean, it was a really good joke. He delivered it perfectly, and the audience were just in fits of hysterics. I mean, it worked really, really, really well. Now, in the afternoon was a big-name speaker. And, quite often the big-name speakers parachute in, do their bit, and then leave immediately afterwards. So he wasn't there in the morning. And in the middle of his presentation, he told the same joke that the guy had told in the morning. And obviously he'd used this joke a lot, and it worked, but not that day. Nobody laughed at all. And he couldn't work out why nobody laughed. And his entire presentation fell apart at that point in time. Yeah? Because he just couldn't work out what was going on. Yeah? So that's the reason why we want to be there all the time, so that we can borrow anchors from people. I'm going to show you a particular example of the power of borrowing anchors in a moment. Then also a phrase that pays. So you notice with each of these states that I anchored for you, it was a phrase that pays. Fucking frustrated. Aha. Light comes on. Something clicks inside. Right on the verge. Obama. Do you think Barack Obama uses this? Absolutely he does. And I'm going to show you some videos of him using it in a few moments. What was his phrase that pays? Yes, we can. And that worked so well that he got to the point where he'd walk out on the stage, and before he said anything, the audience are going, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Do you think he's created some anchors? Yes. Can we do it as well? Yes, we can. Yes. Now, here's a great example of borrowing gestures and therefore borrowing anchors. So let me give you a little bit of little bit of background to this, because I'm going to show you a video. So to put it into context, this is when Princess Diana first died. Yeah. Well, she's died second time, but when she first died. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but the nation were obviously in shock. But they were horrified by the response of the royal family, particularly Prince Charles. So in the days after the news that Princess Diana had died in Paris, there was a huge amount of bad feelings towards the royal family, particularly to Prince Charles. Yeah, huge bad feeling. And the whole nation were behind this pretty much. Now, at this point in time, in the nation's history, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister. And although, obviously, things have probably changed for some people since then, at this point in time, Tony Blair was very, very popular. Very, very, very well received. And he did a speech about Princess Diana. Actually, it's become known as the speech that changed his career for the better. Now, what he does, I saw this live, and I thought, there's something unusual about that speech. So I watched it again. Then I realized what Tony Blair is doing in this speech. Right at the start, I'm going to show it to you, but I'm going to point it out to you because it just takes a fraction of a second right at the start. Right at the start, he uses a gesture, which isn't his. And he uses a particular intonation pattern that isn't his. It's Prince Charles's. Now, if you see Prince Charles speak, whenever he starts to speak, this Prince Charles gesture that he has like this. And whenever he starts to speak, he always does this. You've probably seen that, yeah. Notice what Tony Blair does at the beginning of this speech.
And we're going in fact, I believe, to Sedgefield, the Prime Minister's constituency, where he is about to make a statement. We heard earlier from the Prime Minister coming now with his wife, Shireen, and his family. And we heard earlier, he's with his constituency agent as well, and we heard earlier that he said he was utterly devastated at news of the death of the Princess of Wales, and we know he is going to say more now.
Prime Minister, can we please have your reaction to the news?
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated.
Notice also the pattern of his speech.
Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family.
3 or 4 words.
In particular, her two
3 or 4
sons,
words.
the 2 boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful.
So what does he do at that particular point in time? What he's done, he walks out and he's very popular with the viewers. But he fires off something which is associated in people's minds with Prince Charles, which transfers the good feelings that the nation have for him to Prince Charles. And you'll notice at that particular, if you remember that particular time, that speech changed the nation's feelings towards the royal family. Yeah. All done by anchoring. Now, I know for a fact that Tony Blair is a master practitioner of NLP. So is Alistair Campbell. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing, therefore, is if people like this are using it in their presentations and speeches, do you think you should be? Absolutely, yeah. Now, there was a rumor at one particular point in time that it was me that trained Tony Blair. It is just a rumor. I didn't train Tony Blair. But, of course, if I had trained Tony Blair, I would have to say that. So it's just one of those things. Now, here's somebody else that uses this. Yes? couldn't see you with the lights there. Just wait for the microphone so that people can hear you over the live feed. Yeah, I couldn't see you there because the light was straight in my eyes.
So I'm just curious. The fact that Tony Blair did that, do you think that he did it because there was a request from the royal family, or because he's a magnanimous man and actually understood what was going on?
I don't know. Was it deliberate? I would say that it was deliberate. It was engineered, because it's too precise. Yeah. Also, I'm going to show you some videos of Obama, and the consistency that's in there it's most definitely deliberate. Whether the request came from the royal family or whether it was just his own idea, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not privy to those kind of secrets.
Thank you.
Let me just have the microphone. I've got another question over here. Let me, can I get that to you? There you go.
Thanks. David, would there not be a risk that Tony Blair would actually have picked up the negative feelings that are towards Prince Charles, would have had them assigned to himself by using the anchors?
Well, the question there was could he have inadvertently transferred the bad feelings of Prince Charles to himself? Yeah. So the way that anchors work in general is the more intense one will collapse the less intense one. So provided the feelings towards Tony Blair were more intense than the feelings towards Prince Charles, the feeling towards him would be transferred to Prince Charles rather than vice versa. Yeah, that's how the anchors work. So was it risky? Yeah, I think you would have to say that was risky. Yeah. Was it worth the risk? Then I would say from the change that was a catalyst for, then the risk was definitely worthwhile. Yeah. Can we just have a last question there before I'll show you another video?
Is he not also using the same kind of head gesture from Diana as well?
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot going on in that particular video. Here's another example of this. Now this comes from, this is a video of Obama. And again, the things about like Tony Blair using this, about Obama using this, obviously people have different political feelings or feelings about these people. Put any of those feelings to one side for a while and just watch what these people do. Because whether we like their message or not, what we're looking at is how they deliver it so that we can use the same kind of tools and techniques in our delivery of our particular message. Now, in this video, this is a speech that Obama did before he was elected as the Democratic candidate for the presidency in his first run-up for the first election. Okay? So what he's wanting to do is to influence people to vote for him. Yeah. Again, what I'll do is I'll tell you what the anchors are right away so that you can then spot them, because they're very, very subtle. So again, remembering anchoring, what we do is we get a really intense state, and when the audience is in an intense state, we anchor it to a specific thing. Now there's two anchors that Obama uses. The first is this. Yeah. So he gets them into an intense state about what he's promising to do if they elect him and they vote for him. Yes, it's the gesture of holding a pen. So what that means is that when they are about to vote and they hold a pen in their hands, it fires off that anchor. Yeah, very clever. Now, the other one is not all voting in the States is by pen, because some of them are electronic voting. So another anchor that Obama uses is this one. what's somebody going to do if they're in an electronic voting situation? They're going to do that. Naturally, because we're anchoring machines, as soon as they do that, the things that he's spoken about will pop into their mind. We're going to talk about language in a few moments as well, because he also does some very interesting things in language. But what you'll see in this particular video is he uses language in a very clever way, because he says this: it's time to turn the page. What do people do when they go and vote? They turn the page. And then as soon as he talks about turning the page, he fires off his pen anchor. Yep. So just have a look at this as he does it. And it's about 12 minutes into this.
When I am president, I will sign a universal health care law by the end of my first term in office. My plan will cover the uninsured by letting people buy into the same kind of health care plan that members of Congress give themselves. It'll bring down costs by investing in information technology and preventive care so we don't have children going to the emergency room for treatable illnesses like asthma. We're going to stop the drug companies from price gouging when patients need their medicine. We'll have a plan that will help businesses and families shoulder the burden of catastrophic care so that an illness doesn't lead to a bankruptcy. And this plan will save the average family $1,000 a year on their premiums, because it's not just folks who don't have health insurance who are suffering. A lot of folks who have health insurance are having a tough time right here and right now in California. We can do this.
Right now, California. We can do this.
It's time to turn the page on healthcare, but it's also time to turn the page on education. To move past the slow decay of indifference that says some schools can't be fixed and some kids just can't learn. As president, I will launch a campaign to recruit and support hundreds of thousands of new teachers across the country, because the most important part of any...
Yep. See the anchors? So he's eliciting intense... You can tell he's elicited intense states because people are screaming in the audience. But then he's putting across his message, what he's promising. Now, whether he actually stuck to those promises or not is another matter. But what he's promising, the particular things he's promising, when he promises them, he either does this or he does this. Yeah. Now, you could go, well, is that just idiosyncratic? If you watch interviews with Obama, he doesn't use any of those gestures. He only uses those gestures when he's speaking in front of a large audience. So they're not idiosyncratic, they're quite deliberate. Yeah. So, but equally, segues us very nicely into language, his use of language. So I want to give you some real quick things on language in your presentations. Now, I know you've got presentations this afternoon. So one of the things that I want you to start thinking about when I'm going through these things, about the anchoring and about language, over lunch, is start thinking about how can you integrate these into your presentations this afternoon and start playing and experimenting with them. Because the wonderful thing about what Andy's created here is that you can play with them and you can experiment with them in a safe environment and get feedback from them. Practice them out. I mean, do you think that was the first time that Obama delivered that? Absolutely not. Yeah. So, two of the most destructive words in the English language. Try and but. What's wrong with try? Well, even Yoda knew what the problem with try was. It's either do or do not. There is no try. How many times do you hear presenters and speakers and trainers talking to their audience and asking their audience to try something over and over and over and over again? But try presupposes failure. You know that, right? Yep. How many times do we hear people using the word but. Over and over again. But what does but do? But breaks rapport. But it also negates anything that comes before it. Where's the microphone? Do we still have the microphone somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Rob, when somebody asks a question, do you want them to come out in front of the audience? Would you like to come out to the... There you go.
For years, I've avoided using the word but for that very reason, so I use the word however.
Right.
Should I be doing that or not?
However has actually the same impact as but. So what I would replace it with, rather than however, is and. Because let's just test it out. So let's say you just said something to me. Yeah, I totally agree, should do that. However.
And you said it's rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that wonderful phrase you hear, with all due respect. Yeah. But imagine if I go like, okay, I totally agree that you think that about the word however. And here's another way of thinking about that. Maintains the rapport and enables you then to put your point of view across without having unconsciously disagreed with the person and leading the person to it. Now also notice that the phrase there, I totally agree that you think that, isn't saying I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I do agree that you think that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
can I just write that down?
Here's my point. Yeah? Yeah, cool. Good question. I'll keep that up here in case we need it again. Yeah? So, avoid the word try. Just take it out of your mind. And take out the word but. Now, those are the two most destructive words in the English language. What are two of the most powerful words in the English language? And we've already just mentioned one of them, is and. But these two are possibly my favorite words in the English language. Because. Now, here's an interesting thing about the word because. They did a study, I think it was at Yale. And what they did was there was a queue of people queuing for a photocopier. And what they had was somebody come in and say that they wanted to push in front of the queue. Yep. And they had a success rate of 60%. 60% of the time, they let the person push into the front of the queue. Then, same queue, person comes in. Can I push into the front of the queue because I only have 5 copies to make? And the success rate went up to 94%. Went up from 60% to 94%. Now, they did the study again, and this is what they did. Now the person came in and said, can I push into the front of the queue because I'm really in a rush? And the success was less, by 1%. It went from 94% to 93%, even though the reason that was given was completely irrelevant. We love reasons. And though, what that study demonstrated was, it doesn't need to be a good reason. It just needs to be a plausible reason. And as soon as we hear the word because, we're more likely, well, from 60% to 93 or 94% to take the action. But it doesn't matter that the reason is actually relevant, real, true, or any of those kind of things, just plausible. Yeah. Now, yet, here's how yet is powerful. Now, I know at this particular point in time, because this is new for many of you, you don't know that you can absolutely use this easily yet. What does that assume and what does it presuppose? At some point in time, we don't know when out in time, but at some point in time in the future, you will use this successfully. Even though you might not know when that is yet. Also notice where I've walked over to. Right in the future, aren't we? Yeah. Now, interestingly, because you haven't actually used this yet, that would cause you actually to not know, right at this moment in time, in the present, that you can present this in the present and actually give your audience the present of your knowledge. Now, the thing about this kind of stuff is, quite often, once you start to practice it, you realize, in actual fact, you've already been doing this. You just hadn't realized it yet. Yeah. So what does that cause you to do? It causes you to go into the future and imagine being able to do this in the future. But as I'm talking to you about doing it in the future, I'm bringing it into the present as you present. You're present on the stage. The present that you're giving your audience, that is. But then as I continue talking about it, now, in actual fact, it's moved into the past in your mind. In fact, now in your mind, it's something that you can already do. You don't need to wait. Get how you can begin to use the language and the stage anchoring all at the same time. So that's the power of the word yet. So the structure of this is as follows. And this is what you'd want to do in your presentation, in your speech, whatever it may be. This is the overall structure. We pace the audience. We pace them where they are right now. And we pace them, and we pace them, and we pace them. Then when we get from our calibration of the audience that we've got them, then and only then do we lead them. Yeah, so let me give you an example of it. So you traveled here this morning, yeah? Some of you may have stayed overnight, but many of you probably traveled this morning. And some of you will have been to this hotel before, and some of you won't. Some of you will have heard about NLP before, and some of you may just know the names, and heard of them, but not actually have learned any of the techniques before today. And because of all of that, you'll be able to create for yourself real undeniable experiences this afternoon of being able to elicit states in your audience, of being able to anchor those states, and being able to influence people in a way that you've never influenced people before. In fact, this afternoon, if not even earlier than that, you may have the dawning realization as to how powerful you are at influencing people at the unseen level in all of your presentations. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah? So what you do is you pace the audience where they are right now. Pace them with undeniables. You traveled here this morning. What are you doing at that point in time? Yeah, I did. Some of you may have stayed here and last night, and some of you won't. Yeah, that's true. Some of you have been to this hotel before, and some of you haven't. Yeah, that's true. Some of you have learned NLP before, and some of you haven't. Yeah, that's true. And because of that, you'll create for yourself this afternoon undeniable experiences of using what you're learning this morning in your presentations to influence people in new, powerful ways. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. In hypnosis, it's called a yes set. In sales, it's called a yes set. Things that people agree with, agree, elicits the state of agreement. So then we give them a new thing to think about, but whilst we're giving it to them, they're in the state of agreement. They've been nodding away. Yes, 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 yes. They're nodding dogs. Yes, 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 yes. Do you want to do this? Yes, 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 yes. Yeah? The chances of them agreeing to this after they've agreed to all of these things before is dramatically increased, particularly if you transition from the pace to the lead using the word because. Yeah. And again, does the fact that you traveled here this morning or not, that you've been to this hotel before or not, or the fact that you may have learned NLP before or not, cause you to be able to have powerful experiences this afternoon? No. Is it plausible, though? Yeah. And it only needs to be plausible. It doesn't need to be true. Yeah. Now, again, I've got a phenomenal example of exactly what I've just taken you through by Obama again. Yeah. And he's using that powerful word about totally undeniable experiences for his audience. And he builds it up, just like I did. And then he leads to where he wants to take them, which is voting for him. And you'll notice at that particular point in time, where he's basically led them to him being the candidate for the presidency, you'll see him anchor it once again, just like you did before.
Minnesota, after 54 hard-fought contests, our primary season has finally come to an end. 16 months have passed.
Totally true. 16.
Since we first stood together on the steps of the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois. Thousands of miles have been traveled.
Disagree with that.
Millions of voices have been heard.
Disagree with that if you can.
And because of what you said,
And
because you decided that change must come to Washington, because you believed that this year must be different than all the rest, because you chose to listen not to your doubts or your fears, but to your greatest hopes and highest aspirations. Tonight we mark the end of one historic journey with the beginning of another. A journey that will bring a new and better day to America. Because of you, tonight I can stand here and say that I will be the Democratic nominee for the President of the United States of America.
Now let's just think about that. Because you realized that this year will be different than last year. Argue with that. Because you chose to ignore your doubts and fears and focus on your hopes and wishes. Disagree with that. Yep. Everybody is agreeing with this. Yes, it is. And we come to the end of one journey and we arrive at the start of the next. Disagree with that. You can't. Now, has any of those things got anything to do with voting for him as the candidate? No. But is it plausible? Yeah. Now, here's the thing with this. In any election, this is why he's using all of this at this particular point in time. In an election, there'll be certain people that no way are they ever going to vote for Obama. Would using anchoring and language have them vote for Obama? Probably not. But if you got somebody who didn't know whether they were going to vote for him or not, can we push them over to the Obama side? Yes, we can. If you got somebody who's vehemently opposed to voting, would using anchoring and language get them to vote? Probably not. But if there's somebody there who's sitting on the fence and wondering whether they're going to vote or not, could we sway them and push them over to voting? Yes, we can. And, you know, that's the difference that makes the difference. You don't need to move all of these people over to here. The difference is in the difference. It's just shifting this small percentage here over to that side. And it's the same in every single one of your presentations. It's the same in every single one of your speeches. Yeah. And again, you know, what I would say to you is, if people like Blair, if people like Obama are using these techniques when they're speaking, do you think we should? I would say that we'd be crazy if we didn't. Yeah. Questions about the linguistic side of things? Any questions about that? No? Okay. So one final thing, because I want to teach you three things this morning. The creation of meaning. How do we create meaning in our audience? And the thing with this is that all meaning is context dependent. There is no absolute meaning to anything. So for instance, when I woke up this morning and looked outside, I thought, ooh, it's a bit of a cold morning for London. I looked at Facebook, and I've got one of my Facebook friends and one of my students who lives in Ottawa. And it's been snowing endlessly ever since the beginning of the new year. And I saw that in actual fact, in Ottawa at this particular point in time, it's minus 56 degrees. If we took the morning that was in London today and took it to Ottawa, they wouldn't think it was cold. They'd think it was a heat wave. We'd be out in shirt sleeves, probably swimming in the river. But if we went and took this morning, for instance, another friend of mine that I saw on Facebook, Greg Secker, who's celebrating his 40th birthday at this particular point in time in Sri Lanka, it wouldn't just be a bit of a cold morning, it would be a disaster. But the morning's the same. So the thing you've got to get is, there's no absolute meaning. There's only meaning when you put something in a particular context. So a couple of little examples of that for you. I saw this video, and it's a video, it's kind of like set in the 1920s, something like this. And there's this guy driving his open-top sports car with his goggles, yeah, and his Beagles helmet, and his scarf's blowing out the side there, coming up to a bend in the road. And as he gets to the bend in the road, another car is coming around the bend on the wrong side of the road. And there's going to be a head-on collision. Shock, horror, he thinks he's going to die. Just before he hits the car swerves onto the right side of the road. And as the car goes past, the woman who's driving the car shouts at him, "Pig!" He's shock, horror, turns over his shoulder, screams at the woman, "Bitch!" Smack straight into the pig. All meaning is context dependent. So I found another nice little example of this. I wanted to read it you. Because this is a great example of meanings being context dependent. A young man wanted to buy a pair of expensive gloves for his sweetheart's birthday. He went to an expensive boutique, bought the finest gloves available, and asked the saleswoman to have them delivered along with the note that he had written. Unfortunately, the clerk mixed up the order while wrapping the merchandise. Instead of the expensive gloves, the the clerk accidentally wrapped a pair of panties and sent them to the young man's sweetheart, along with the following note which he had written. Darling, I have been trying desperately to come up with a special gift for your birthday. I chose these because I noticed that you are not in the habit of wearing any when we go out in the evening. I would have chosen the long ones with buttons, but since your sister wears the short ones, which are so easy to remove, I wanted to get the same style for you. You may be concerned that these are a delicate shade. However, the sales lady showed me a pair that she'd been wearing for 3 weeks, and they were hardly soiled. She said that there are a couple of important care considerations that I should mention to you. First, when you take them off, remember to blow into them before putting them away, since they'll naturally be a little bit damp from wearing. Second, be sure to keep them on while cleaning so that they don't shrink. The sales lady made such an impression upon me that I had her try them on for me. She really looked great in them, and I can just imagine how great they're going to look on you. I decided to mail these so that you would have them in time for your birthday. I really hesitated because I wanted so much to be there to watch you put them on for the first time. There is little doubt in my mind that many other hands will have touched them before I see you again. I can hardly wait to run my own hands over them, or do as the French do and gently kiss them. I hope you really like them and will wear them for me on Friday night. P.S. The latest style is to wear them folded down a little with a small bit of fur showing. All meaning is context dependent. So what we want to do is we want to create the meaning that we want. So what I want to share with you is a technique which is called pre-framing. Because what we can do is we can put things into a specific context before we deliver the content, which will mean that we can predetermine the meaning that it has for our audience. So in your presentations, your talks, your speeches, etc., my guess is that at the end of that, you will have a particular call to action. Maybe a sell-on at the end of your presentation, your speech. And there will be certain objections that we could predict that people would have to that call for action. So we predict what those objections could be. We paste them, paste, remember? Paste those objections before they come up. And then we reframe them, as in we change the meaning of them before they've come up. Yeah. So in any particular audience, when you think about your call to action, the thing that you want them to make a decision about, we mind read, we predict what their objections could be. We pace those objections, and then we reframe them, we change the meaning of those objections before they've come up. Yeah. So let me give you an example of that. In selling, there are only 4 things that people ever object to. Only 4 things. There's multiple variations of these, but there's only 4. First is money. It's too expensive, or I don't have the money. There's time. I don't have the time, or it's the wrong time for me. There's the I don't believe you. And think of it. How many times when you've been presenting what you've got to offer, do people go, it's too good to be true. It can't be that easy. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. Yeah, lots of times. You might have even heard other people saying that when you've been in an audience together. Do you want to know why everybody isn't doing it? Because they're all sitting at home going, it's too good to be true. It can't be that easy. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. That's the reason why they're not doing it. Yeah. But that's an example of, I don't believe you. And the other is, it won't work for me. I can see how it would work for somebody else, but I'm special. I'm unique. It won't work for me. Those are the only 4 objections that anyone will ever give you if you're doing a sales presentation. So using that idea, let's now give you a demonstration of how we can use that pre-framing technique. Now, pretty much I think everybody put their hands up to the fact that they'd seen Tony Robbins or trained with Tony Robbins or watched his videos or whatever. And Robbins does this absolutely wonderfully. Firstly, putting everything together that we've been talking about today. Now, pretend or imagine that you're at a Tony Robbins seminar, and imagine that I'm 9 inches tall, and I have hands like plates. Yep. How many people here are totally committed to their own personal growth and development? Yeah. In fact, you'd go, say I, wouldn't you? How many people here totally committed to their own personal growth and development? Say I. And because everyone here is committed to their own personal growth and development, that's why I'm here. Because the people that I want to work with, the people that I want to spend time with, are people like us that are committed to our own personal growth and development. See, people who aren't committed to their own personal growth and development, when they're offered a massive opportunity to grow, when they're offered a massive opportunity to develop, would say things like, it's too expensive, or I can't afford it. You'd never hear people like us say anything like that, because we're committed to our own personal growth and development. People who aren't committed to their own personal growth and development, when they're offered an absolutely fantastic opportunity to develop and grow, would say, I don't have the time, or it's not the right time for me. People like us that are committed to our own personal growth and development know that there is only one time. There is only one right time, and the right time is now. People who aren't committed to their own personal growth and development, when they're offered an opportunity, would say, that's too good to be true. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. Or they say, I don't believe what you're saying. People like us who are totally committed to their own personal growth and development would never say something like that, because we know that we, and only we, can make it work for us. Which is the same reason that people like us who are committed to their own personal growth and development would never say, I could see how it could work for somebody else, but I can't see how it would work for me. Because people like us who are totally committed to their own personal growth and development know that we make it work. That's why I love spending time and teaching people like you that are totally committed to their own personal growth and development. And it's the reason why I want to talk to you today about Date with Destiny. Here's the dates, here's the price, etc. Now, are you likely to go, that's expensive? Are you likely to go, I think I'll do it next year? Are you likely to go, it's too good to be true? If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. Are you likely to go, I could see how it could work for the person sat next to me, but not for me? No. A couple of reasons. One is all of the objections have been pre-framed. But then also, using one of Cialdini's 6 rules of influence, and one of those rules is commitment and consistency. Now, when I say to you, how many people here are totally committed to their own personal growth and development, say I, you've made a commitment. You've made a public commitment, in actual fact. Now you have a very strong drive inside of you to be consistent with that commitment. So you wouldn't do anything which would mean, in actual fact, that you weren't committed to your own personal growth and development. So he's taken out the 4 objections before he's done the sales pitch. This is the reason why, you know, those of you who've studied with Tony, one of the things he's always doing is like, is this useful? Say I. I. Yeah. Is this making sense? Say I. And everybody's there. I. And he does it for 3 days, all the way through Unleash the Power Within weekend. Is this making sense? Say I. I. Is this useful? Say I. Yeah. 3 days. All day, every day, for 3 days. Do you think somebody at the end of those 3 days is likely to walk out of the seminar room and go like, what a bunch of crap that was? None of it made any sense whatsoever. I can't see how I'd use it. No. Because he's having people make a commitment all the way along. Stacking it. Yes, it's making sense. Yes, this is useful. Yes, it's making sense. Yes, it's useful. Yes, it's making sense. This is useful. For how many people here has the material I've been sharing with you this morning made sense and been useful? Cool. And how many people here are committed to their own personal growth and development? So Andy, actually, obviously what I've done is given you a very, very small taster this morning of what we can do with some of these techniques with speakers and presenters. And Andy actually asked me to put together a very special training for you, which is called Masters of Influence. Let me tell you what's covered in Masters of Influence. Cialdini's Rules of Influence. How many people, just out of curiosity, how many people here have heard of Robert Cialdini and read his book, Influence? Brilliant. It's about 50% of you. If you haven't read it, get it. And when you get it, read it. Yeah. So otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah. Now, I say that quite jokingly, but I had this, you know, this guy comes up to me on a training, and he says, David, I've been told I've got to have back surgery. I have 3 of my vertebrae fused. Is there something I can do with NLP and timeline therapy and hypnosis? And I said, yes, absolutely. Get this book, Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. And he goes, oh, thanks very much. I didn't see him for a year. And he shows up at a training, and he said, you might remember me. He said, last year, about a year ago, I asked you if there was something I could do around using NLP and timeline therapy and hypnosis to heal up my back pain. And he recommended I got a book called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. I said, yeah, I do remember that, actually, yeah. He said, well, I got the book. I said, cool. He said, but I didn't read it. And he said, and I had the surgery and had 3 vertebrae fused in my back. 2 weeks after the surgery, the pain came back. So I went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, there's nothing I can do to help you. You've had the surgery. The only thing you can do is have painkillers for the rest of your life. When I got home, I read the book. And what it said in the book was it said, talk to the brain in your back and ask the brain in your back what it wants you to pay attention to. And he says, as soon as I asked the brain in my back what it wanted me to pay attention to, he said a memory came up. A memory of being, and I was absolutely furious and enraged because he said a couple of years ago, my business partner ripped me off for hundreds of thousands of pounds. He said, I never got angry about it. I thought I dealt with it. But when I asked the brain in my back what it wanted me to pay attention to, he said, I got into a real rage about my business partner. But as soon as I got enraged, the pain in my back disappeared. So he said, I used the timeline therapy techniques you taught me to get rid of the anger. So now I'm not angry anymore, and I don't have any pain in my back. He said, but I do have 3 vertebrae in my spine fused for the rest of my life. This is how I responded to him. Next time I tell you to get a book, fucking read it. So Cialdini's 6 rules. So Cialdini is an academic, and he's been studying influence. It's actually 6, but I put 7 there just to create curiosity. Utilize anything that comes up. That's all I can say as a speaker. Yeah. So he found there were 6 rules. When you adhere to these 6 rules, it dramatically increases your power to influence people. But it's a very academic book. Now, so we cover those 6 rules, but we use Neuro Linguistic Programming to apply those rules. So I'll teach you how to use Neuro Linguistic Programming as a speaker to make those all 6 rules work for you as a presenter and a speaker. Then you may have heard of Ericksonian hypnosis. Erickson died in 1980, which is what? That's 35 years ago, isn't it? Died in 1980. And even today, he is taken as being the world's greatest hypnotherapist. 35 years after he died. Imagine how good he was when he was alive. Now, most often when we think about Ericksonian hypnosis, we think about therapy. But what if you thought about therapy as being the ultimate form of influence? Because if you think about it, therapy, a successful therapist, is somebody that influences someone who's been doing a particular behavior for maybe year upon year upon year upon year. And this therapist has such an influence on the person that not only does he enable them to change their minds, he enables them to change their behavior. So if you think about therapy as being the ultimate form of influence, pacing someone where they are now and leading them to where we want them to be, do you think there could be some really powerful things in Ericksonian hypnosis that we can use as a speaker? Absolutely there are. And you can actually analyze those speeches from Obama from an Ericksonian hypnosis point of view, and those whether Obama is a phenomenal Ericksonian hypnotist or his speechwriter is, somebody is, because they are absolutely exquisitely written from an Ericksonian hypnosis point of view. So imagine if every single one of your presentations, every single one of your speeches, every single one of your talks was not only applying all 6 rules of Cialdini, but also using Ericksonian hypnosis to literally, without anybody knowing, hypnotizing your audience. Then also looking at the latest discoveries in neuroscience. What we've got in neuroscience now is we can actually look moment by moment, particularly at the instant that somebody makes a decision, what's going on inside the person's brain. And once we know that, and we understand that, then we can actually use that information to influence people to make decisions more quickly and more easily. And, Andy said, what's the business that we're in? We're in the business of change. What does change require? Decisions. It requires different decisions. As a presenter or speaker, your ability to influence people to make decisions is how you'll enable people to take your message and create the change in their lives that you want them to make. Then also, mentalism. Probably the best known mentalist we have in our environment at this point in time would be Derren Brown, for instance. And yes, is a lot of what Derren Brown does a trick? Yeah, it is. Particularly the stuff that he does on his TV show. It's a trick. We know that. And though, is Derren Brown absolutely masterful at what we call in NLP sensory acuity? Reading the non-verbal cues from people. Yes, he is. Is he also an absolute master of then using non-verbal suggestion to lead the person into the area or the direction that he wants to lead them into? Yes, he is. Absolutely masterful at that. So there are many things in mentalism that we can learn to use as a speaker and a presenter to increase our ability to influence change. And these things here have never been taught together for speakers before. Never been taught before. they've been taught in their isolation in different areas, but never for speakers. That's why Andy asked me to put this together for you as a very unique and a very special training that only speakers will be coming to, and how to apply them in your presentations and trainings. And we'll look at how do we use them in speaking, but also how do we use them in advertising, whether that be off-the-page advertising, e-shots, websites, any of those kind of things. How can we use them in selling? How can we use them in coaching? But equally, what you'll start to realize is that these tools and techniques you can use in every single area of your life. Because are there times that you want to influence your kids, if you've got children? There are times that you want to respectfully influence your partner, or your colleagues, or your friends, or any of those kind of things. And the answer is yes. And if you apply all of these things in any of those situations, your ability to influence people will skyrocket. So we're going to look at it in all of those areas. All 5. And we're going to look at how to use them on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face, or by video. So many of you use Skype or FaceTime these days for some of your client work. And how can we use them in written emails for one-to-one? And also one-to-many. How can we use them from the stage? But also how can we use them in videos, YouTube videos, webinars, all of those kind of things. So it's designed specifically for your application area. Also, how do we use them on social media and advertising? So I know that you've got already dates and commitments and all those kind of things through your Public Speakers University and Academy. So I've liaised with Andy specifically to make sure that the dates that we put in, it's not been easy, to be honest with you, to be able to arrange these dates, because I know your diary is very full. Mine's certainly very, very full. So we have some dates for this training, Masters of Influence, and these are the only dates that are available. So this is the only one of these that there's going to be, at least this year. And the dates are the 6th to the 8th of June. It's a 3-day training. 3 days intense training. And the investment for that is £900, including VAT. Which is real excellent value. And because you're here today. Because I know that just because you're here today, because you could be somewhere else, because you're here today, I know that you're totally committed to your own personal growth and development. Because you've sat intently listening to everything I've said, making notes. Because you've laughed at my jokes some of the time. I've agreed with Andy that we would do a very, very special price today for this training for the people who are here today. And just so you know, the room that we have for this training, we can take 50 people. And Andy and I are doing a webinar about this event, which is going to be going out to Andy's entire list. This is a today offer. So today, for you guys here, the price is $347, including VAT, for the whole 3 days of training, which is, you know, the thing that Andy and I wanted to do was to make it a complete no-brainer. And at that price, this is an absolute no-brainer. I know that what you're going to learn from this will skyrocket your ability to influence as a presenter and a speaker off the Richter scale. So if you want to go for that, then you need to be fast. You need to be quick. So the guys that are back there, and they'll get you signed up for that training. Yeah. So over lunch, think about what I've been talking about this morning. and think about how you can start to put those things into your presentations this afternoon. Okay? Thank you, and I hope to see you on Masters of Influence.